So the Bears hired Ryan Poles as their new general manager. He served as the Chiefs' assistant director of player personnel. He spent 13 seasons with the Chiefs. He rose up the ranks for his work in the college scouting department. And this is a guy who was a finalist for 4 GM jobs. The ones that are in the media, the names are the Vikings and the Giants. He was a finalist for those 2 jobs. So the Chicago Bears got a guy that essentially every team that was in the market for a GM wanted. They had Jim Caldwell in the building today. They're going to have Dan Quinn tomorrow for a second interview. We'll see who the Bears end up with.
Please, God.
But Ryan Poles is somebody who is well regarded around the NFL. He's viewed as a very smart, bright, young guy. What do you think this does for the Bears moving forward, getting a GM like this?
I think you have to be excited if you're a Bears fan. I mean, after the whole Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy experience, it's going to be – it can't get much worse than that, right? It's funny. Poles was actually –
twice. Give him a little credit.
Okay, sure. Poles was actually an undrafted free agent who was signed by the Bears, so he's got some history there.
Cool.
And I also think he was the front runner for the Vikings job, so they kind of stole their divisional rival there, got their GM over him. But yeah, I think you have to be excited if you're a Bears fan. I mean, you have a potential franchise quarterback in Justin Fields. You just traded up future draft picks to go and get him, I believe, at 10 overall in this previous draft. His biggest, his number one job right now is to find a head coach. You mentioned Jim Caldwell is one of the finalists, Dan Quinn, as well as Packers DC Matt Eberflus. That's how you pronounce it. One name I will want to look out for is Eric Bieniemy. Coming from the Chiefs side, I wonder if he's going to get some love too. But it's interesting that they're interviewing a couple of defensive coordinators because he is a younger guy. I expect him to go the offensive route here, especially if you have a young quarterback and you have a ton of work to do with this team. The offensive line let up 58 sacks, which is the most in the NFL. Allen Robinson went from one of the best receivers in the league to one of the worst receivers. You do have a nice piece there with Darnell Mooney and David Montgomery, so you have a couple things to build on, but this team just needs to be overhauled overall on the offense. And on the defense, you're getting a little bit older there. Khalil Mack is approaching 30 as well. So if you're a Bears fan, you should be excited, but there's a lot of work to go. But getting a young, someone who's 36 who understands where the NFL is going, and you have a guy. I know some Bears fans are split, and just overall the people in general are split on Justin Fields. I still have faith in him. I think he was put in a really bad situation, so I'm excited to see where he takes his team. His first step to really see how he kicks it off is going to be head coach, because if he does go with a Dan Quinn, I don't know if I love that. I want someone in offensive mind who could help build up Justin Fields' confidence and turn him into a franchise quarterback.
I think it's a great move. Kansas City has a history of bringing in great talent, and now you bring in a mind who has taken a team, or that team has been a part of 4 straight AFC championships, going to what could be their how many Super Bowl now? Their third Super Bowl, in that amount of time. So now you bring in a guy who has that championship experience into an organization that desperately needs some type of revitalization, and it's perfect. You bring in a young guy, a guy who you can really have be in your franchise for a plethora of years if he's the right guy for you. And as you guys mentioned, that this guy was really regarded. The different teams wanted him to be a part of what they wanted to build, and the Bears were lucky enough to snatch him up. I think that the Bears have their ways to go still. I still think it's going to take a few years, but as long as you have Fields on this rookie contract, you're in a good situation. You don't have to worry about this year's draft because the Giants have your picks. So you're really focusing for these next few years to come. You want to hit in these late round picks, no doubt about it, but his job really starts, I believe, I guess you could say in this offseason, like Joel said, you want to bring in the coach, you want to have a solid draft. But I think that we'll really start to see him next year. That's when I'll start to at least evaluate him. Show me what you can do in the first round, really bring in a guy that could be a huge difference maker for them. Because I didn't love the Justin Fields trade for me personally, at least at the time. You trade up, you trade your next year's pick for them. I get it, you needed a quarterback really badly, but you had just gotten Andy Dalton at that point, and then you made it a statement early in the season that Andy Dalton was your quarterback. There was just a whole big mess going on there. I felt as if you needed to do one or the other. Either you bring in because was Dalton even reliable this season by any means? Not necessarily. There were still games where Nick Foles had to step in. So I think that this guy has to address a couple things. I think they need to figure out Allen Robinson's contract situation. I don't believe he will be on the team next season, but he is a good part of this offense, or at least a part of this offense that if I'm the general manager, I want him to be a part of, especially with Fields being young. I want to surround my young quarterback with as much talent as possible. I think where the O-line definitely took a great stride this season. I think it was in part due to Justin Fields' ability to scramble outside the pocket. Me and you have had this conversation a few times where O-lines get ranked a little bit higher because their quarterbacks are able to scramble and evade pressure. Now, I still think they need to address some of the O-line needs. David Montgomery's a great back. I think they just need to figure out the coaching situation. They need to get a play caller that really can maximize Fields' abilities, and I think they'll be in a good spot. Defensively, they're not a horrible team. They drafted a great corner in Johnson, I believe his name is. I'm blanking really hard on his first name. Jalen
Johnson.
Jalen Johnson, thank you very much. That was a great pick by them. He has shown great strides in his game throughout the entire season. Eddie Jackson is a great safety for them, too. He's getting older, though. I don't know if they decide to bring him back. Maybe he decides to move on or they trade him to a contender team just to get him that championship ride. But for me, it's around surrounding Justin Fields with as much possible to be successful. You traded this capital already. Poole understands that I had a guy in Patrick Mahomes just come into a situation where the weapons were already surrounding him, a plethora of weapons around him. I think it's about, like you said, getting a coach that really understands Fields' game, understands the modern football and where it's headed, and really working with Fields to elevate his game.
I thought this was an A-plus hire. It's not that I'm so well-versed in terms of GMs, but if across the league it's a consensus that this guy is very smart and he's an up-and-coming star, that's what he's been labeled as, I think this was an A-plus hire. I'm not mad at Dan Quinn getting looks or Matt Eberflus. It was actually reported that Ryan Poles had talked to Jim Caldwell, Dan Quinn, and Matt Eberflus to potentially team up with him in Chicago. So I think it's between those three candidates, whether who's going to get the job or not. I feel like offense right now, that's the way the league is trending. But Dan Quinn, you even mentioned it before. It was either you or Drew. As long as you assemble a good staff around a quarterback, they can develop. Dan Quinn went to Atlanta with Kyle Shanahan. I mean, if
a home run.
I mean, that was a home run,
Yeah.
but Dan Quinn, if he can get an OC who is a great OC, and he can get a quarterbacks coach that is a great developing quarterbacks, we look at it right now. Pep Hamilton with Davis Mills. There's a chance he's not back in Houston. Right now, it's looking like he will be back in Houston, but that's a guy that won't be a head coach, will most likely still will be an OC or quarterbacks coach. So they can find offensive guys, and the Bears historically have been a defensive-oriented franchise. And when you look at the personnel on the roster, it's much more suited for a defensive-minded coach. But with that being said, I think they should go Jim Caldwell. Jim Caldwell, we know he's a great offensive mind. He in Indy in his first year had a great record with Peyton Manning. Very next year,
No doubt.
didn't have a quarterback. He got fired because of that. So did Bill Polian. Bill Polian, who's been leading the search on a GM, has ties with Jim Caldwell. So I think there's a connection right there. And he was in the building today when Ryan Poles was there. Part of me tells me the fact that that he left the building without being the coach maybe tells me he's not going to be it. But something tells me that they just want to give other candidates a shot and give them another interview. Ryan Poles ultimately took this job because he believes they already have a quarterback in place. For somebody who is an up-and-coming GM, who was a finalist for many jobs, at least if I'm a GM, if I take one job over the other, it's because I think this roster is much more well-constructed to have success, and they have their quarterback. The two teams he turned down, basically, the Giants don't have a quarterback. They're kind of a mess. The Vikings,
I don't like that.
Kirk Cousins, he's a really good quarterback, but his contract's coming up. It's going to be some muddy waters there. There's not much cap space. With the Bears, you talked about trading a first-round pick. As long as Justin Fields is a star quarterback, it really does not matter.
That's fair.
If he's a franchise quarterback, it doesn't matter.
That's fair.
This guy, Ryan Poles, had a major part in scouting Patrick Mahomes with the Chiefs. The Chiefs have hit on so many picks, whether it be early round or late round. Just this season, Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. I mean, those guys are all freaking starters.
No doubt.
And Trey Smith was a late round guy. I think Ryan Poles was a home run hire. I think he's going to do a good job in Chicago. And depending on how Aaron Rodgers' situation goes, the Bears could be a playoff team next season.
I have an interesting report on Aaron Rodgers, Drew. Please don't scream.
No way.
Jordan Schultz is reporting that Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams would love to team up for the Broncos. That would be...
I told you.
He's not a reliable enough reporter for me to be like, that's a fact.
Because there was a Denver Post beat
No
reporter.
disrespect.
There was a Denver Post beat reporter who came out and brought up the idea of trading Jerry Jeudy for Devontae Adams and everything like that.
And
but
you said it was
that
lying?
still seems
I don't
more
think
like
so. I
a
just think it's not
hypothetical.
going to happen.
It's an interesting report.
Oh my God.
That it would be nuts.
I would cry.
It'd be crazy.
I would cry.
It won't
I
happen.
would be here. Why don't we want, it's... What's wrong with you? I've never rooted against the Jets a day in my life.
I'd be rooting for them.
I would die. I would be
ruined.
so happy. Oh my God. We're out to Denver immediately. First game, I'm there. 12 jersey. I'll wear the half 12, half 17. Somehow I'll make it happen. Oh my God. I'll cry.
That'd be electric.
I'll really cry.
That'd be electric.
Oh my God.
You guys
Don't
have
scream.
40,
How could you say
you guys
that to
have
me?
41 million in cap space, so it's possible. You'd have to make a couple things work probably, but
Oh my
Aaron's getting 41 mil.
is he a free? Is he a
He's
free?
not a
agent?
free agent.
Void? He'd have to be traded.
Nah, he
He could
traded.
restructure his contract though.
Yeah, and you guys can make restructure
Oh my
contracts.
God,
and
without a
cut
doubt,
guys and
without a
stuff.
doubt.
And yeah, and Tate. I mean, Tate's gonna get a huge bag.
Oh
but
my God. Oh, need.
that'd be super tough.
I've been manifesting 12 in a Broncos uniform. We need it to happen, man. We need it.
My gut feeling is that the head coach will be Jim Caldwell for the Bears. That's my gut feeling. I think it's going to get
Jim
announced in
Caldwell?
the next. Yeah,